When my sister got locked in the basement by our power-hungry HOA president Karen, none of us knew I will destroy Karen's barn to pieces. She will never touch my sister again. I never thought I'd find myself breaking down a barn door in the middle of the night, but that's exactly where I ended up because of Karen. The woman who became the newly elected HOA president had crossed every line imaginable, but what she did to my sister was unforgivable. The moment I heard her muffled screams coming from Karen's basement, I knew everything had changed. This wasn't petty fines or neighborhood drama anymore. This was personal. "You crossed the line, Karen," I whispered to myself, adrenaline surging as I clutched the crowbar in my hands. "Now, it's my turn. Drop your city below. We want to see how far this story has reached." It all started the day Karen became the HOA president. For years, she had been the kind of neighbor everyone tolerated but no one liked. She had a knack for inserting herself into other people's business, always finding something to critique. A stray weed in the flower bed? Karen noticed. Trash bins left at the curb an hour too long? Karen had her clipboard ready to document the offense. But up until her election, Karen's influence had been limited to her unsolicited advice and passive-aggressive comments. That all changed the moment she gained power. Karen didn't see the role of HOA president as a way to improve the neighborhood or foster a sense of community. To her, it was a position of control and opportunity to reshape the neighborhood to fit her impossible vision of perfection. Within days of her election, new rules and fines began to circulate. The language in the HOA newsletters became stricter, more authoritarian. And while the other board members seemed uncomfortable with her approach, no one dared to stand up to Karen. I'll never forget the first time she showed up on my porch, clipboard in hand, her lips pressed into that tight, condescending smile she always wore when she felt she had the upper hand. "Good afternoon, David," she said, her tone syrupy sweet. "I'm here about your fence." I looked at her, confused. "My fence?" She nodded, gesturing toward the side of my yard. "Yes, your fence. It's an eyesore. We've had some complaints from the neighbors." I glanced at the fence in question, a sturdy wooden structure that had been there for years without issue. "Karen, it's a perfectly good fence. It's not broken, it's not leaning. I don't see the problem." "Well," she began, tilting her head slightly as if she were trying to be understanding, "the HOA guidelines clearly state that fences need to align with the aesthetic of the community. And, well, yours doesn't." I stared at her, trying to process the absurdity of what she was saying. "The aesthetic of the community? Karen, this fence has been here for years. It's never been a problem before." She flipped through the papers on her clipboard, tapping a specific section with her pen. "As the newly elected HOA president, it's my duty to uphold these standards. If the fence isn't replaced by the end of the month, you'll receive a fine. And if it continues to remain out of compliance," she let the sentence hang, her meaning crystal clear. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Karen, this is ridiculous. The fence is fine." She gave me that infuriating smile again. "Well, the HOA disagrees. You wouldn't want to be that neighbor, would you?" Before I could respond, she turned and walked away, her clipboard clutched tightly to her chest like a weapon. I stood there, watching her retreat down the sidewalk, feeling a mixture of frustration and disbelief. That wasn't the end of it. Over the next few days, I noticed Karen making her rounds through the neighborhood. She stopped at house after house, clipboard in hand, jotting down notes and leaving violation notices taped to doors. She seemed to thrive on the authority her position gave her, relishing every opportunity to point out someone's failings. The real kicker came when I overheard her talking to one of the neighbors at the mailbox. "We're just trying to maintain the property values," she said, loud enough for everyone within earshot to hear. "It's about keeping the neighborhood nice for everyone." The neighbor nodded along, clearly not wanting to get on Karen's bad side, but I could see the discomfort in their expression. It was obvious that Karen's aggressive approach was making people uneasy, but no one dared to call her out. It wasn't long before I received my second notice, this time for my flower beds. Karen appeared on my porch again, her clipboard, as always, tucked under her arm. "Unapproved landscaping," she announced, handing me the paper like she was delivering a court summons. "Unapproved landscaping?" I asked, incredulous. "Karen, they're flower beds. How can they possibly be unapproved?" "Well," she said, her tone condescending. Any changes to landscaping need to be pre-approved by the board. It's all in the HOA guidelines. You're joking, I said, but the look on her face told me she wasn't. I'm just doing my job, Karen replied, feigning innocence. I suggest you remove the flower beds immediately to avoid further fines. She turned to leave, but I couldn't help myself. Karen, why are you doing this? It's like you're going out of your way to find problems where there aren't any. She paused, glancing over her shoulder with that infuriating smile. I'm just trying to keep the neighborhood up to standard, David. It's not personal. But it felt personal. It felt like Karen was targeting me specifically, and as the days went on, that feeling only grew stronger. Karen didn't just enforce rules. She played politics, sowing distrust, and spreading whispers until everyone began to see each other through her judgmental lens. At first, I didn't notice the shift. My neighbors still smiled when I passed by, still nodded hello when I watered my garden. But slowly, Karen began to poison the well. The Johnsons, who used to bring over homemade pies for Thanksgiving, suddenly seemed distant. I'd wave to them on my walk, only to be met with half-hearted nods or quick glances away. The Garcias, whose kids had played soccer with mine for years, stopped inviting us to their backyard barbecues. It wasn't overt hostility. Karen was far too smart for that. Instead, it was a subtle kind of exclusion, a quiet turning away that made me feel like I was no longer part of the community I'd loved for so long. But what really pushed things over the edge was when my sister, Emily, came to visit for the weekend. Emily wasn't one to back down from a fight, and she had no patience for Karen's games. It was Saturday morning when Karen showed up on my porch yet again, clipboard in hand, ready to deliver another violation notice. Emily was sitting on the couch, sipping her coffee and scrolling through her phone. I've got it, I said, heading to the door. But Emily followed, curious about the woman I'd been venting about all weekend. Karen didn't waste any time. Mr. David, she began, her tone clipped and formal, I'm here to address a new violation. Your lawn has exceeded the acceptable height as outlined in Section 3.4 of the HOA guidelines. I stared at her, stunned. Karen, I mowed the lawn 3 days ago. It's fine. Well, she said, adjusting her glasses, it's clearly not up to standard. I suggest you address the issue immediately to avoid further penalties. Emily snorted from beside me, arms crossed. Don't you have better things to do? She asked, her voice cutting through Karen's carefully rehearsed speech. Karen froze for a moment, clearly not used to being challenged. Excuse me? You heard me, Emily said, stepping forward. You're standing here harassing my brother over his lawn? Get a life. Karen's eyes narrowed, her fake smile disappearing in an instant. I am ensuring the community maintains its standards, she snapped. No, Emily shot back. You're bullying him, and honestly, it's pathetic. The tension between them was palpable, the kind that made your heart race even though you weren't the one arguing. I could see Karen's jaw tighten, her grip on the clipboard turning white-knuckled. She didn't respond, instead spinning on her heel and marching back down the driveway without another word. Emily laughed as Karen disappeared down the street. Unbelievable, she said, shaking her head. How do you deal with that woman? I tried to smile, but something about the interaction left me uneasy. Karen wasn't the type to let comments like that slide. She thrived on control, and Emily had just taken that away from her, if only for a moment. You know she's going to retaliate, right? I said, shutting the door behind us. Emily shrugged. Let her try. She's a joke. But deep down, I knew Karen wasn't joking. She'd crossed lines before, and now that she felt challenged, there was no telling what she'd do. Karen's retaliation came faster than I expected. That afternoon, I noticed her car parked near the house. She wasn't on the porch, but something felt off. Emily went out for a walk a few hours later, enjoying the mild weather while I cleaned up in the backyard. She said she'd be back in an hour, but when 2 hours passed without any sign of her, I started to worry. I called her phone, but there was no answer. I texted her, checked the usual spots where she might have stopped the park, the coffee shop, but still nothing. That's when I saw Karen's car parked in her driveway, her lights still on. Something in my gut told me to go over there, and what I found changed everything. My sister Emily had always been my sounding board, my source of calm amidst the storm Karen had unleashed on my life. Every weekend, Emily would pull up in her small blue car, park in front of my house, and spend the day catching up with me. We'd laugh over shared meals, reminisce about old family stories, and discuss anything and everything that crossed our minds. Her presence was a reprieve from the chaos Karen had stirred, a reminder that life outside the HOA's suffocating grip still existed. But even Emily's visits were too much for Karen to tolerate. The following weekend, Karen struck. Emily's car was parked outside as usual, and we were inside discussing our plans for the day, when the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Karen standing there, clipboard in hand. "Good afternoon, Mr. David," she began, her tone sharper than usual. "I'm here about your sister's vehicle. Once again, it's been parked on the street for an extended period, causing a disturbance for the neighborhood." I rolled my eyes, already exhausted by the conversation. "Karen, it's not causing a disturbance. You're the only one who seems to have a problem with it." Karen pursed her lips, her fake smile twisting into something colder. "That's not true. Several neighbors have expressed concerns about the impact this frequent parking has on our community's image." Later that day, when Emily arrived for her usual visit, I told her about Karen's latest stunt. My sister listened intently, her expression shifting from amusement to frustration as I recounted the encounter. "Parking disruptions?" Emily said, shaking her head. "That woman is out of her mind. My car is parked on a public street, for heaven's sake. What's next?" she bans, walking on the sidewalk. She paused for a moment, her face growing more serious. "Actually, there's something I need to tell you," she added, her voice quieter now. I set down my cup of coffee, sensing the shift in her tone. "What is it?" I asked, leaning forward. Emily sighed, brushing a stray piece of hair behind her ear. "When I went for a walk earlier, Karen approached me near her house. I was minding my own business, just passing by, when she started yelling about trespassing. Before I could even respond, she grabbed my arm and dragged me into her house." My stomach dropped. "Wait, what?" "She took me into her basement," Emily continued, her voice shaking slightly now. "Locked the door behind her and just left me there. For 3 hours. I stared at her, trying to process what I was hearing. "3 hours? Emily? Are you serious?" "Dead serious," she said, her eyes locked on mine. I screamed. I banged on the door, but she didn't come back. Eventually, she let me out, but she didn't say a word. Just opened the door and waved me out like nothing had happened. The room felt impossibly quiet, the weight of her words settling in. My hands clenched into fists as anger surged through me. "Emily, this is insane. She crossed every line imaginable. Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "I didn't want to make things worse," she admitted, her voice trembling. "I thought maybe if I kept quiet she'd stop harassing you, but I can't stay silent anymore. She's out of control, David." I nodded, already formulating a plan in my head. Karen had gone too far this time, and I wasn't going to let her get away with it. "She locked you in her basement," I said, my voice hard and steady. "It's time she learns what happens when you cross the line." I couldn't figure out what had caused the shift until Emily filled me in. She was at the local cafe, grabbing coffee before heading to my place, when she overheard Karen speaking to a group of neighbors. "She's saying your house is bringing property values down," Emily told me, her tone sharp with frustration. "Something about your fence and those fines she keeps handing out. People believe her because she's HOA president." I felt my anger flare as she continued. "She's clever about it, though. She doesn't say your name outright. She says things like, 'We need to address certain properties dragging down the aesthetic of the neighborhood,' but everyone knows she means you." That night, the air was thick with the weight of everything Karen had done. The fines, the lies, the humiliation. Her actions had pushed me to a breaking point, and as I sat in my car at the edge of her property, I could feel my pulse hammering in my ears. The barn loomed in the distance, its pristine white walls gleaming under the moonlight like a monument to her tyranny. It was the perfect symbol of everything Karen stood for: power, control, and her incessant need to dominate. I killed the engine and stepped out, careful not to make a sound. My breath was steady, my movements deliberate. The crowbar felt heavy in my hand, but its weight was comfortinga, reminder of the control I was about to take back. The fence surrounding her property wasn't much of an obstacle. I climbed over it with practiced ease, landing softly on the other side. For a moment, I stood still, scanning my surroundings. The house was dark, the windows lifeless. Karen was either asleep or too arrogant to think anyone would dare challenge her on her own turf. I crept toward the barn, every step measured, every noise scrutinized. The gravel under my boots crunched faintly, but the rustling of the nearby trees masked my approach. As I drew closer, the barn seemed to grow taller, more imposing. Its double doors, freshly painted and carefully maintained, stood as an unwelcome reminder of Karen's obsession with perfection. With one last glance over my shoulder, I gripped the handle of the crowbar and wedged it between the doors. The wood resisted at first, groaning under the pressure, but I didn't stop. A sharp crack echoed through the night as the lock splintered and gave way. I pushed the doors open and stepped inside. The smell of aged wood and polish filled the air. Karen had spared no expensivery corner of the barn, was meticulously organized, from the antique furniture lined up against the walls to the shelves stacked with neatly labeled boxes. Even her husband's vintage car sat in the center like a trophy, its glossy exterior gleaming in the dim light. This was her kingdom, her pride and joy, and I was about to dismantle it piece by piece. The first blow came without hesitation. The crowbar crashed against the nearest shelf, sending its contents tumbling to the ground. The sound was deafening, wood splintering, glass shattering. But I didn't stop to take it in. I moved to the next shelf, then the next, each swing of the crowbar more forceful than the last. Antique lamps, porcelain figurines, framed certificates, everything Karen had carefully curated, came crashing down around me. The shelves that she'd spent so much time organizing were reduced to piles of broken wood and debris. I turned my attention to the furniture next. A mahogany chair, intricately carved, stood as a testament to Karen's taste for luxury. I brought the crowbar down hard on its backrest, watching as it splintered into jagged pieces. One by one, I dismantled the chairs, the tables, the cabinets, all of it reduced to rubble. The car was next. I hesitated for a brief moment, staring at its pristine surface. It wasn't just a car. It was a statement, a symbol of the life Karen flaunted in front of everyone while using her power to crush anyone who defied her. The crowbar scraped against the paint as I dragged it across the hood, leaving a long, deep gash. The satisfying sound of metal on metal pushed me forward, and I brought the crowbar down on the windshield, shattering it with a single blow. Glass rained down onto the seats, glittering in the faint light like tiny shards of justice. By the time I was done, the barn was unrecognizable. Shelves lay in splinters, their contents scattered and broken. The furniture was reduced to piles of wood, the car a vandalized shell of its former self. I stood in the middle of the destruction, catching my breath, my heart pounding in my chest. I walked to the doors and pushed them wide open, letting the cool night air sweep through the barn. I left them that way, ensuring that anyone passing by in the morning would see what had happened. This wasn't just revenge, it was a message. Karen's reign of terror had officially met its match. Karen's rage shattered the neighborhood's quiet serenity. Her screams pierced the air, a shrill declaration of her fury. From the moment she saw her barn reduced to ruins, she wasted no time. She stomped down the street, her face flushed with fury, her knuckles white from gripping her clipboard, as if it could restore her lost power. I didn't hear her coming until the pounding on my door echoed through the house. As I opened it, Karen was already mid-rant, her words tumbling over each other in incoherent rage. "You'll pay for this. Do you hear me? You'll regret it. You think you can get away with this?" I let her scream, leaning casually against the doorframe, my phone in hand. "Like you paid for locking my sister in your basement?" I said calmly, holding up the screen for her to see. The recorded video played silently, her house unmistakable in the frame, her actions exposed in painful clarity. Karen froze mid-sentence, her eyes widening as the implications hit her. She looked from the screen to me, her face draining of color. For the first time, Karen's unshakable confidence cracked. "You call the cops, Karen," I continued, my voice steady, "and I'll show them exactly what you did. You want to fight? You've already lost." The rage that had fueled her dissipated in an instant, replaced by something she had never shown before: fear. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Without another glare or argument, Karen turned and stormed back down the driveway. This time, the sound of her retreat was music to my ears. She had tried to break me, to isolate me, to bury me under her rules and lies. But in the end, she learned an important lesson. Actions have consequences. And for Karen, those consequences were ones she could never escape.